Okay, you are online.
Okay, hello everybody. Happy to see you here. My name is Andy Tupia. I am an artist and a filmmaker. Together with Claudiana Milona and Yuan Chun Yu, we present the work Earthmovers for the Tbilisi Architecture Biennial. We thank them very much for inviting us. We will have a talk today on practices of commons, and for that we have invited activist Diana Malai, who is based in Tirana, and artist Valentina Bonizzi. I will later on explain more about their work and art practices which intersect, and also how it briefly links to our work. We will begin with giving the possibility to look at our work. So we will have a look at the video now, and then Claudiana will start to explain a little bit about the dynamics of the project. I will see you then back after the film in 5 minutes and 31 seconds.
A caterpillar is a larval stage of progress. Caterpillars crawl boneless. They have no spine. They can never erect. They crawl or bow down, crawl and measure the earth. Bulldoze means a large dose of any sort of medicine or punishment effective for a bull. Being bullied can have short and long-term effects. Feelings of shame, changes in eating habits, sleep disturbance, social isolation. It's about crawling without spine, intimidating with violence. Bulldozing as a verb originates from the direct exercise of force to the subject being destroyed or reshaped. The machine is a descendant of the plows that colonial settlers and Western expansionists used to grade land for subsistence and development. A plow cuts into soil. Tamed bulls by castration pulled plows easily through hard, packed soil. Bulldozers are for taming nature, bringing order to the seemingly haphazard natural world by a gentleman's agreement, an order that can only succeed resorting to every means, including violence. Then the earth is reshaped, turned over, one furrow at a time, behind machines, complete burial of preceding residues, a land free from obstructions, hosting future movements of planting and cultivating machinery. Soil is washed away. The caterpillar is crawling. Flattening the ground underneath its relentless tracks and fearless blade, the bulldozer moves on above the inert evidence, progressing already in the future, paving the way to the acceleration of urban modernity. Clearance materializes into a technological progress. The bulldozer mediated the transition from past to the future. Clearance is about being clean, a clean slate. There is usually light involved. All is bright, and the earth is exhausted, fatigued, having lost breath. Carbon dioxide. Look how happy I am. Black teeth, inked tongues, soured taste buds with a new name, ceremonial officiality. It's strangers who matter. Birds, bugs, beasts. We live in a different world. Can I use this piece of garden? Can I bird grass flowers? Can I bug the beasts? Pluck desolate eyebrows in trees? Blackened inside. There is a mouth which is not supposed to speak. How much progress more of a silenced voice hushed in knees, straightened up knees. Can I pluck you back? They stand for the missing mouth. Can you please clap back? Wide open, in a gap, because I am where standing, knees aching, I am warning, I am about to open my mouth. There is laughter coming, blackened inside. There is sweat, sour, salty. Foreign dust on my face should feel like second skin. It's more about being second all the time. The caterpillar is crawling. Can I bend any further than this? My forehead is aligned with my knees. Can I sing you a song? How real am I? Friable. Carbon dioxide. There is a caterpillar crawling.
So I can start, I think. Hi everybody, my name is Claudiana Milona. As Andy presented, I'm gonna very briefly go through some insights of the research dimensions that are behind the project, and the project based on the video that you saw. At large, the research tries to look at the culture of clearance that has been present, especially in post-communist countries of Eastern Europe, mainly as a means to catch up with the West and the idea of progress as a Western construct. Especially after the 90s, we have seen that there has been a prevalent need to embrace a certain culture of the aesthetics of capitalism and consumerism, that of purchasing goods, accumulating, that has been brought as an inevitable need of looking for a sort of acceptance. Therefore, cities be consumed within a specific gaze that looks in ways on how to fit in. At the same time, the project actually comes as a response to a very recent event that has caused quite a lot of disturbance in the public opinion in Albania, which is that of the demolition of the National Theatre of Albania in Tirana. Through this project, we try to revisit again this event and try to reflect on larger power structures that have enabled such a practice. And we try to see how it links actually to the state of affairs of commons in Albania at large. We have done so through choosing the lens of the machine itself, which has been enabling this practice. Therefore, the bulldozer, which is used in vastly in urban clearance and urban redevelopment, and links finance, economics, politics, agriculture, and the environment. Basically, a bulldozer is a powerful tractor which is equipped at the front with a metal blade and that moves on caterpillar tracks. Bulldozer, in fact, is a very complex, has a very complex history as a word in which agriculture, mechanical engineering, conflict and politics intersect and do as well connect. But at the same time, it has persistently embodied and indicated a strong link to the brute force and coercive violence. It is as well a machine that deals with the very basics. So it deals with the earth, with transformation, with destruction and creation. As the researcher Ralph Harrington very nicely puts it, it is the year zero machine. As it does bury the past while it builds the future, it demolishes in order to construct, and it levels the ground and starts anew from a cleared and emptied landscape. This machine does represent one of the key technologies of modernity, even though it has been vastly overlooked, but nevertheless, it is a crucial symbol of the modern age. The mechanical bulldozer of today is distinctively American technology and got highly advanced and modernized around 1920s, and then even more perfected in the 40s under the pressures of the war. The vast usage of the bulldozer as a weapon in the Second World War improved its technology, as well enlarged its operation and praised its exploits. What is also very interesting is the etymology of the word, which has different entanglements, and was also its first usage was in the United States. So a bulldoze means a large dose, effective for bull, of any sort of medicine or punishment. Through time, its meaning has changed to imply intimidation by violence, and then to finally, nowadays, we can recognize it to the brutally used force to push through any kind of obstacle. The first published uses of the word actually was in the 1870s and referred to the organized racist violence in the politics of post-Civil War area in America, especially in its south. To bulldoze something has constantly meant the use of force to reshape the environment, rather it be physically, but not only, also socially and politically. Going back in time, actually, the machine has its root and is a descendant of the steel and iron plows that the colonial settlers and Western expansionists used to grade land for subsistence and development. Early settlers cleared forest for farmland, they carved up the plains and drove canals and railroads through the land. These several acts of clearance involved simple tools like the axe in the hands of hired and slave labor. Basically, as we can also see in the picture, it consists of a frame with a blade at the front into which were harnessed two mules to be later replaced with the crawler tractors that increase the tool's power and capacity. The aim to perfect and advance further the machine, of course, came parallel to the modernization of agriculture. And in the 19th century, more advanced technologies actually facilitated further these acts of clearance for mining, forest harvesting, and dam building in rural lands. These events have also been largely argued as to be responsible for widespread degradation of soil. But in general and at large, the advancement of the bulldozer was perpetuated by American companies during the huge constructions projects of the interwar America, and it reached beyond the Atlantic, also in Europe, but not only beyond, at the front of the Second World War. They cleared the ruins of bombed cities, restored farmlands, reconstructed and built roads, and cleared and prepared the ground for new large constructions. As well, the military character of the bulldozer was even further and greatly manifested in the hybrid type called the tank dozer, which is basically a tank combined with a bulldozer blade. But nevertheless, they have been used from the state apparatus in largely intimidating communities, and more precisely as a way to actually perform a sort of censorship and explicitly express the force imposed and used from above. One of the examples is the well-known event called the Moscow Bulldozer Exhibition in 1974, which was an unofficial art exhibition that was taking place in a vacant lot next to Moscow, and that was forcefully broken up by large police using bulldozers. At the same time, the very same machine is used to counter state oppression, while the operator is not a state-indicated one. For instance, we have the very well-known event of the overthrow of Milosevic in 2000, known as the Bulldozer Revolution, which took its name after the day-long protest in which an engineering vehicle operator charged the radio television of Serbia building, considered to be symbolic to the Milosevic regime's propaganda. Armored bulldozers are still in use nowadays, largely for military reasons. The main combat engineering tool of the Israeli Defense Forces is the D9 bulldozer, which is a model actually produced by the largest company of earth-moving equipment, Caterpillar, but it was which was also the same that the U.S. government, U.S. Army used to clear forests during the Vietnam War, but which has been modified by the Israeli Defense Forces in order to work under heavy fire, and has been largely used in the mass clearing of Palestinian settlements. Now, for 27 months in a row, under the threat of the bulldozer's blade, was also the National Theatre of Albania in Tirana. The building was built during the 1938 till 1939, during the Italian occupation of Albania by the architect Giulio Berti, and which actually standed on public property, and was announced to be demolished in 2018 under a plan to replace it with a new theatre, a modern one, by a famous Danish architecture office. The process through which this demolishing and rebuilding would go through was pretty contested by the public opinion, especially because of its character of a public-private partnership scheme with a Tirana-based developer who would build a new design project in exchange for public land and the right to construct 6 towers next to the new theater. Anyhow, in response to this announcement, a movement to protect the building started, and as a tool of resistance towards its demolition, a group of citizen activists and artists occupied the building for 27 months. Where they were self-organized to every day guard the building, and in addition they also made use of the theater square through an open microphone. They organized up to twice a week free theater shows, sometimes in the dark due to the lack of electricity, which was cut off and was an action from the government, and other times with self-funded generators. This long resistance, it's interesting to talk about it because it's almost unprecedented in Albania, and at least to our reading and to many, it is a direct and comments in the city. Anyhow, on Sunday, 17th of May, 2020, sometime around 4 a.m. in the morning, which happened to be also the last day before the lifting of a nationwide curfew and ban on group gatherings, which was a response to the COVID-19 situation. Dozens of unidentified police officers entered the building and beat and arrest activists and evacuate them, and also the citizens that were inside, to then pave the way to a bulldozer that actually did tear down the building until the early morning hours. We're not going to go too much into the details of the event, but just trying to understand also how the presence of bulldozer has occupied somehow the Albanian public popular imagination. And it has been, on one hand, actually has been used very prominently by the state narrative propaganda as a symbol and icon of social progress that paves the way to the modernization of the country, with its ability to mark actually the starting process of transforming it with road carving, ground leveling, large-scale construction. But on the other hand, especially the recent years, for the general public and mainly within marginalized communities, it has been and still is a symbol of destructive exploitation, and as well a tool of oppression. It has been involved in demolishing houses to make a way for new modern high-rise constructions, clearing old historical buildings for shopping centers, privatizing beaches for luxury resorts, demolishing of informal housing, leaving behind roofless families, and as well deforestation by threatening the livelihood of communities with large-scale projects such as those of hydropower plants. So we have seen conditions where inhabitants are observers to a large, continually active building site, watching everyday buildings disappear and others growing in their places. So this machine, actually, the bulldozer, appears at the very beginning of the construction process and prepares this ground for all that would follow and that we have mentioned. So to wrap it up, I mean, this was some of the, let's say, things we wanted to address, but at large, we wanted at least to also link it to the Tbilisi Architecture Biennial theme. We wanted to see and address actually how commons are also linked to specific systems of exploitation, and how also the very constructed aspiration for progress is exploited in itself, and so perhaps reflect on as well the structural and institutional violence that are exercised on commons. And maybe to give the word to Diana and to pick up from here. And Diana, Andy introduced her a little bit before. She's an activist, which is based in Kamza. Which is a city that has been always considered as the periphery of Tirana, with second-class citizens and with strong difficulties in advocating with local governments, struggling with institutions, the precarious state of land and house ownership, and the continuous struggle to have their collective voice recognized, meaning the ATA group, which is an activist group that Diana is a co-founder of. And especially maybe during this talk, we will also give some insights on their continuous struggle with the cultural house that is supposed to be a shared space in Kamza. So I will perhaps stop my share screen and maybe invite Diana to perhaps tell us a little bit more about the practice of ATA. And I think it's interesting to also, since we went so much into the etymology of the word bulldozer, maybe to explain us a little bit also the etymology of ATA itself, especially in relation to the spatial production between periphery and the center. And maybe to give a short introduction about Kamza at large, for at least an audience who doesn't know the history of the city, and especially, of course, in relation to commons. And if we can talk about Kamza and its relation to land ownership, especially after the 90s, as an explicit, actually, right to claim commons itself, and a right that before the 90s was brutally denied. If you can maybe talk through those lines.
Yes, Claudie, thank you very much for your introduction and inviting us, me and Vale, in this conversation. I will immediately introduce a little bit more ATA Group, which is an informal youth group created in 2016 in Commons. And when you say commons and commons, it seems like the same thing. And yes, ATA means, if we want to translate it into English, it means them, or as the pronoun, they, them, the others. And if we have a look in our Albanian vocabulary, we will see that they or them is, it means, or is used when we want to indicate persons or objects that you mention, but they are not there. They are in the distance, and usually you use also the finger to indicate them. And it's exactly this meaning of ATA. It means that they are in distance, they are not there when you talk about them, and that you continue to keep this distance. And in fact, even if Kamsa is only 12 or something like that kilometers away from Tirana, the capital city of Albania, institutional politics and policies and central power from the government has maintained this city and Kamsa and its inhabitants as distant as possible, reducing them in numbers for the elections, transforming it exactly what you said before in the periphery of Tirana. In fact, Kamsa has gained its own status as a city in 1996, before it was considered as one of the villages of Tirana, the capital city. During the communism regime, was one of the most important agricultural cooperatives in Tirana. And after the falling of the regime, the city was populated by thousands of inhabitants coming from all over Albania, but especially from the north of Albania. And this exactly unplanned arrival in this suburban area, their attempt and our attempt to build new houses and create by themselves a safe shelter for their children without going through a legal process of housing and land and properties rights, gave to them their identity. And from this context, I must say that Kamsa were exactly considered and stigmatized as wild people coming from the north without culture. And I must say that today it's very important to say that Kamsa is one of the biggest cities in Albania. I'm not sure, but it's maybe the 5th city in Albania from its population and from its youngest age in the country, and one of the most rapid demographic developments and with the highest density in the country. I don't know if you can guide me with.
Share the screen?
No, just a moment. And yes, I'm just trying to understand better and to remind your question. So the practice of Ata and why we created our group, it was the only way that we have to live in the city like this. And yes, for us as citizens of Kamsa, let's say that the relation with because for us the state is not the structure whom we give the power to protect us, but is the structure from which we should protect ourselves. And we feel and we have this perception that the state is against us, and our perception is based on their destructive politics that you, during your presentation, have, and with the pictures, you give some examples, beginning from National Theatre, from different places. The example of Astir, which is the neighborhood of Tirana, which was destroyed. And now that we have so many difficulties with and struggles with the projects of rebuilding places which were attacked from the earthquake in Albania.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Since we're talking about, buildings and that are assigned a specific function, especially, how commons are also somehow narrated within political language. Usually they tend to, be discussed within the binaries of public and private. And having said this, I know for a fact that in Kamsa you do actually have a palace, cultural center, which is called the Palace of Culture. Is it a place of common, and how do you exercise the right to it?
Yes, since it was built in 2011, the Palace of Culture was built into the promise that this building it will be our common place, our common cultural place, where all the people of Kamsa will enjoy it and will develop their passions and have a local theater space, a cinema, public space, etc., which in fact was not like that and was occupied from our officials, and especially from our local officials and mayors. Now we have struggled as a group to have so many times to present our theater performances there, and that because the Palace of Culture in Commons was used especially for elections, for meetings from different parties, from PD and PS in Albania, and now, for example, that is the PS, the Socialist Party in local government in Commons. They have given the most of the spaces of Palace of Culture to different banks, private one, local bars. There are all these things developed there, and we all the entries of the Palace of Culture does not give you the entrance to the Palace of Culture. If you want to enter in the cinema, you have to go through a local bar, or you have to go through a bank door, and after you will find out the cinema or theater or the library, the public library. But when I receive your invitation to be part of this conversation, for sure it's a little bit different in Kamsa, because the city is only 25 years old. It's the newest city maybe in Albania, and when we try to say that what are we going to do to protect our commons, in fact in Kamsa the first duty that we feel as citizens is to create, first of all, our commons. Mm-hmm. Because the state, the institutional policies, they try to, till now, for 25 years, they tried to not build this common space. And that's why, as citizens living and for sure coming from families that they have built their own private space, we have tried into this in the middle, being in the middle from our personal perspective and political or public one. We have built ATA and our attempt to create commons. And after we will create commons, we will try and struggle to protect commons in Kamsa. So before to protect them, we must say that we have to create commons. And when we say that we have to create commons, we say that we have to create, first of all, a community which who will to be together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe the last question, and picking up on what you said before, perhaps also talking about this with Valentina and your combined practices together. I mean, it's interesting how you say how you say that we need to create commons and protect them. So, I mean, thinking of commons also as a way to kind of create this sort of structure to be safe because of a constant threat. But in my mind, I'm just wondering, especially because of the peculiarity of Kamsa and this arrival of institutions actually landing and imposing in a top-down way quite late, after there was already some sort of structure there. And I mean, I just want to throw it out there. Maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I do believe there was commons in Kamsa. I mean, Kamsa became Kamsa because there was a structure before that maybe then Now the struggle is how to protect the threat from overimposing a new structure on it that comes usually also from institutions. And I can think about this also in terms of the new, map making of usually municipalities that, with a line on their map, it's not only a meter square of a territory they touch, but there's behind a lot of histories, because the city itself was self-built, and especially when it moved from the unit of the domestic of the house, they did create systems of solidarity in building together also the common spaces, like, even the more basic ones, let's say, and literal ones like roads. And so, yeah, how do you think about that? And as well, how also are you? What are your actions actually in protecting these commons or creating these commons that you were talking about?
Yes, one of the most important things as a process of Kamsa and people from Kamsa is the legalization of the properties, which is a process which has been going on for more than 30 years, where citizens stay ready for different everlasting deadlines and procedures to legalize their properties, and this process is based on the fear that we have from the state. The reason why one feels realized when one legalizes his property is because she or he will was never sure one day that the state would arbitrarily come and destroy the house as illegal, and to build a road, a set of new apartment buildings, or privatize the land to someone connected with the local politicians in Kamsa. These are the new forms of acting from our local community, from our local power and representatives. And of course, one thing is to have the fear from the state, and after you have the house legalized, it doesn't mean that to be legal, it's not the guarantee that your house will not be destroyed. However, and so the fear goes on and on and on. In Kamsa, we feel the same fear. The state, from the other side, knows very well how to play with this fear that we feel, and it feels to us that it is only the only game that the states can play, and we know that. And Kamsa, I must say that it's not the only one example, but it's one of the examples from Albania, and this Albanian, we must say, post-communist as a post-communist state. I want to bring another example. Apart from Palace of Culture, one of the most important cases lately in Kamsa was we saw one photo during your presentation. Valias is part of Kamsa with more than 20,000 inhabitants, and more than 2,000 inhabitants were left without house, because of the new project that the municipality, in collaboration with the central power, had to rebuild their houses because of the new project that they had in Valias. And they were the whole process that we were part as activists in that neighbor was considered by us and from the people, from the inhabitants, was illegal, was non-transparent, and against also the constitution and against all the laws in Albania. And because none of the persons who lost their house knows now when their house will be built, or they do not have a public consultation process. And now all these 200 inhabitants are dispersed in city, living with only 100 euros a month as help from the local government, in total lack of information. And another thing that we have in Laknas, it's a common space. In fact, built from the people. It is like a small garden or a small park for the citizens there, more than 200 or 300 people. And the local authorities want to transform it into a private business. And people from Laknas, they are in a legal process with against this private business and against Kamsa, the municipality of Kamsa, and they are struggling more than 1 year to win against this project. So yes, it's true when you said that. In fact, it's not exactly that we have to create from the beginning the commons, but in some terms we have to, because common for us, it means also to have the same necessity to create our commons, but at the same time, we have these small spaces, which are our common spaces, and we are struggling to protect them from destructive politics of local government and central one.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add also, it's very important because we are used to listen the discourse of the leftist movements in Europe, who criticize the neoliberalism in the last 30 years and its privatization in the name of public institution and common properties already being there. But to link with what you said, we understand how important that is. But in our situation, we cannot play this role in this move, especially because of the general lack of public institutions, especially in the cultural area, mm-hmm. and the citizens' identification with public properties. Whatever is common and public needs for us as a group to be invented first. So our group identifies politics as the art of creation, and we could not exist otherwise in commons. And through our theater performances now, as a response of what happened to our national theater, and as a response to our local politics and palace of culture, we create our theater, which it goes as a present to local communities for those who never had the chance to see it and never had the chance to go to the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yes, I can share also some photos of that, and after maybe we can. I don't know if you have other questions or in conversation with Vale, we will add.
Yeah, maybe Andy wants to add something to this while we watch also the pictures.
Thank you, Diana. I was able to attend actually Teatriature 2 times. It was a really beautiful experience. Most of it was done during the pandemic when I was able to attend, so it had also a very beautiful stage scenario on the outside when you can recognize the patterns of Kamsa in its informal adjusting choices as an urban planning made by the people, as we can see from the pictures that Diana is sharing with us now. And I also like the idea of gift, as she said, because this is on a volunteer basis made with the young activists and practitioners and people who go to the center of Ata. I just want to ask Diana before, or maybe Valentina also has questions for Diana. We are here a bit formal, but also informally, we all know each other and we've worked together. My question for Diana is, how was the response of the communities? Because one of the aims of Kamza is to be able, through the artistic practice, which is also an activist practice in this case, it's difficult to discern them from one another. How was their response so far, and what type of connections were you able to witness?
Yes, thank you, Andy, for your question. We have done lately our 4 performances in Kaunas, and we were in different locations. And the first one was in Valias, where we tried, in fact, to use our theater performance as a pretext to organize small protests and a small, I must say, not exactly a protest, but a public union to give the possibility to the people to talk about their problems with their land and with their houses. And in fact, it was one of the most difficult moments for us, because the most of the people were not used to see a theater performance in the middle of the place of Miniera Valies. So it was like after 30 years, there were a new group going there to do a theater performance. And some 3 of the men, we were present, in fact, during our theater performance, and they interrupted in a violent way our theater performance, and we were obliged to stop it. For sure, it was very important for us, because even if it wasn't done till the end, we managed to communicate with the people, and we created some links with them. And it is important also for us to understand what we have done till now, and to reflect on our action. With some of the people from Valias, we continue our communication, and we are helping them in a legal way to better understand their rights and how we can help them to get the information from the municipality about their houses. In Bathore, another neighbor of Kamza, we had so many people also there present. We managed to finish completely our theater performance without violent acts, and people there were very happy and enthusiastic. With enthusiasm, they accepted our action, but we had problems with the state, so with the police. We have another different problem. Meanwhile, in the yard of the Prime Minister office, where the possibility to gather people from different professional backgrounds and artists to have the possibility to see a movie. Meanwhile, in Bathore wasn't allowed a theater performance in an open space. And even it was an order from the police. We managed to continue our performance without asking them. To talk with the people, a different kind of emotion we had in Kaunas, in the center of Kaunas, in a small field, and in Fruticultur, which is another neighbor of Kamza. And we had so many youngsters present in our performances, and for them was the first time seeing a theater performance, which it means a lot for us. And we had also other comments from a woman present in our theater performance. She said that maybe you should consider to include the eldest people in your theater performances, which of course for us it's amazing, and it can be our future part of our future plans. But theater as a practice for us now for 6 years that we are continuing to do it. It is very important because it creates also a community or a collective group, and the actors that they did who are also our activists, and they did the performance theater in different places in Kamsa and other cities. They are now they went through a reflective process, and they now understand better the politics and what it means to be an activist in commons, and the necessity to be a citizen, engaged citizen in these days.
Thank you, Diana. I will then continue my part in conversation with Valentina, which is then open to Claudia and Diana if they have questions. Valentina Bonizzi, I will shortly introduce because I couldn't say much before we showed our video, is an Italian artist which is based in Tirana for now. She works by digging into archives and creating synergies with different communities. Her projects are very complex and layered. She will later explain us better how she creates the synergies for her work. Noteworthy is that she works with communities in different regions, that she has been able to be present and create a longevity in context with the community, be them in Scotland, in the region of Molise in Italy, in Kamsa as well with Diana and the guys of Ata, as well as in the Daesh refugee camp in Palestine. Her work has been exhibited internationally at the Maxi Museum in Rome, Museum for Contemporary Art, at the Glasgow Center for Contemporary Art, at the Akademie der Künste in Berlin, and also at the Ramallah Academy of Arts in Palestine, amongst others. She is active in the Albanian cultural scene, which is where I met her. And I also was able to come to know the work of Diana better through Claudie, who organized a small workshop with students from the Royal Academy of Arts in the Netherlands. That's how the synergies of us four came into being. And we created a small group of commons in interests and thoughts about activism, art, and public spaces. So I thank Valentina a lot for being here with us and accepting the invitation. And since we are talking about communities and people, you have many interesting works, but I wanted you to introduce us briefly to some aspects of Notes of a Deputy and also Homage to Kafka. In Notes of a Deputy, you invite, I am taking one aspect of the work because again, it is layered and they are complex to explain. You invite social entrepreneurs to talk about the law on social entrepreneurship in Albania, and you invite them in a very specific space, which is the Center for Openness and Dialogue within the governmental offices of the Prime Minister. How was your experience and what kind of synergies were there produced?
Yeah, maybe for the audience, I can share my screen and show some images. Share. Okay. So, do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a picture of the Albanian Prime Minister's office building, which was constructed in between 39 and 41 during the fascist occupation of the country, and it stands in the middle of around the main boulevard, which was constructed around the same time, and it was always described as the boulevard without the city because it was so big, the boulevard, and the city couldn't surround it really at the time. And this is when the Center for Openness and Dialogue that you mentioned opened in 2015. And you can see the neon sculpture is an artwork by Philippe Parrenaud, which was basically dedicated to the prime minister who wanted to open this door, let's say. And this is how contemporary art has been attached to the historical narrative of that building. And so this is the inauguration. There were like very important artists. The center was completely reconstructed, and politicians like Angela Merkel were invited at the opening. And this is another picture where you can see the Parrenaud being protected, because whenever there was a protest, and there has been many, this contemporary art work, which didn't mean much to the Albanian people, not to say almost anything, apart from being probably a font of light in the boulevard, was attacked. So probably when it was attacked, it kind of gained some meaning, actually, in my opinion. But and this is okay. This is a political protest, political in sense of political party, so organized by the Democratic Party, the opposition, and they stand in the middle of the boulevard for 3 months. And here you can see them protecting the protest, and then on the other side, the prime minister protecting the entrance, which is quite absurd, actually. And here we come to not so a deputy that you were talking about. So this work was not I proposed a project in code. The first one failed. Then I proposed another one, which was the time when I could understand a little bit more the meaning of that place, which was a little bit complex and layered in itself. And this is the result. So what I proposed was something that could be very, very site specific, in the sense that it's a place where the law is decided somehow, and or the representation of the law is there, and also where art is proposed in some way. So I try to combine both things, and I'm gonna. This is the first page of the publication I did in the end. And it started like this. It started from a constellation which represents a law. And the law is law 65 on social entrepreneurs, which when I came to Albania, I got to know. And they told me we have a law that represents, that it aims at representing us, because the law was approved but not activated yet. And this law is very wrong. So it doesn't represent us correctly. So the process of representation within the law wasn't happening. And this process was activated by the same government. So the same government that opened COD, the code. No? Mm-hmm. So I thought, how can we discuss this law and invite these social entrepreneurs? No, so the first, let's say, point in the publication, just to summarize in 3 points, what I did was the green velvet curtain. So the green velvet curtain. Sorry, I go back a moment. You can see, like, on the back, of the picture there on the right-hand side of the first picture, you can see there is a green velvet curtain. And the green velvet curtain is what I thought of taking as an element to explain what code can be, what it is, because of course there is the biography of the space, when it opened, who wanted to open it, the program, etc. But what is the very essence of that place? And so the green velvet curtain is this is this space in between, no? And here there is just the story of this old woman who enters the code to visit the space, which tells her story and her history in many, many different ways. And she finds that she sees that green velvet curtain and she doesn't know what to do with it, you know. And then when she goes back home, she thinks back at that moment when she saw the curtain, and she still feels the urge to play hide and seek with that, no. And when Diana was talking before about the palati cultures and how you have to enter so many different layers before you get to the art, you know, before you get there, it reminds me of that as well. And because and this is a picture that it's very related to what I'm saying. On the left, you see Creu PES, which is a criteria of the law. So it's very technical thing. So 22, 21, 23. And there is a note by a social entrepreneur who is saying what is wrong with that. And on the left, you can see just a picture, which is a picture that one of the artists that I worked with proposed. And we merged together in the publication. So there are very two different discourses, but I thought it was very interesting to see the idea of the mask, you know, the idea of something that is in between. And so what happened with the project is that actually what was behind that green velvet curtain and the urge to play was probably developed through the collaboration with the artist and with the imagination that artists can activate. So that's what also Diana was saying in a different way in their work, no, is about, okay, there's no common, we have to imagine them, no? So it's not anymore about wanting to understand the corruption that there is behind the curtain, but the urge to reinvent what there could be otherwise, what it could be otherwise. And how to make a constellation was the second part. And it was basically the representation of the law as a constellation, no? So a constellation is a point of view. Very simply, we see a constellation from the Earth. If we change planet, it doesn't exist anymore, you know. And how can we understand the law in a similar way, you know, from different points of view? So this is a picture of the first dialogue with the social entrepreneur. So you can see me on the left, and then looking at me with very lot of curiosity in understanding who I was and what I was doing there. And I was just introducing myself as an artist. So at that point, you know, the point of view completely crashed, because they thought they were going inside the Prime Minister's office because somehow there was a will from the government to change that law. And no, actually, it wasn't the will from the government. It was me as an artist who don't have anything to deal with the government or actually even social enterprises, because I'm not a social entrepreneur. And so this it changes the perspective, no? So how can we do a 1 + 1? What does it create? And so this gets to the politics of operations, and the operation that was created was, yes, layered and complex, but the main one was that during the protest that happened in front of the Prime Minister's office, we started in collaboration with other artists. So there was a communication amongst us, and a meticulous work, I must say. So the operation was to start doing together, to start understanding this imagination behind the green velvet curtain, no, and start activating this imagination and together. And we did it inside and outside, and around the building. Am I clear? Am I?
Yes.
Okay. If you have questions, just stop me. Okay. And so here we get to, so how do we exist inside the law? That was a question of homage to Kafka. So do you want me to talk about that, or?
Which is your other word. Yes, before we jump to the homage to Kafka, since we talk about commons and commonality, and the initiator of your work with Notes to a Deputy is this law on social entrepreneurship, what was the experience with the syntax of the social, of what we should have in commons, and commons as a practice of care? Was there a full understanding of all the participants of what should be the social and what should be the commons, or was there any confrontation with them?
Yes, I mean, that was the whole point, actually, to understand. So it was really the whole point. So when we say social entrepreneurs in Albania, actually, until at that time when we were doing the project, they didn't really exist, in the sense that until you don't have a law that represents social entrepreneurs, you can say social entrepreneurs, but you don't really exist as a legal form, no, as a legal entity.
Yes.
So what we experienced during the dialogue was very much a process of intranslatability of what could be social, you know, because it was very much taken for granted that you know, the process of making laws, and this is, I guess, everywhere. That maybe Diana can say a bit more, because she's a lawyer and I'm not, but often is copied. No, I mean, constitutions are copied, not copied and paste, but, you know, taken as a reference. So what happens also with the writing of laws is that you take a little bit from the Italian law, you take a bit from the Slovenian law, you take a bit from that. And this process is often very bureaucratic, no? And sometimes, although I must say that often amazing people work on this process, and they really get to the root of that. I don't want to make like people who make laws superficial, because I would lie. That's not true. It's more the machine that makes it superficial, but the individuals not. But the social, it was a very process of translation in entering the other, no? So in entering and understand the other, understanding when we start activate the process of creating a language that can embed all the elements that we lose during the translation, which is a very difficult thing to do if you don't have this imaginative space that we as artists or as activists, or here in this moment we can use, no? But for in the law, this often is not seen as an element to use, no? So then you get lost in definitions, unfortunately. So what was problematic is to speak about social in the same way Italians speak about social, in the same way Britons speak about social, in the same way. No, it's not the
Exactly.
same.
Because for Albanian, social is then so quickly linked to socialism, and it's what also Diana was explaining before, the heritage of post-communist countries, in what they, with Kamsa and with their inhabitants, they are trying to create this social, this commons, which is also very abstract and very difficult to give also to the new generations. And even the older ones have lost this practice because they lost their historical and cultural references during the regime, and they struggle to find a commons. I think, this is personal, in what has been post-90s Albania. So yeah, it's interesting that you pointed out, quite rightfully so, the difficulty in translating.
Yeah, it's I think it's the process of translation is I mean, we have it in everything, in your position as an artist or an activist, but you also have it in relationship. You always have to translate what is your world into the other person's world, and then you have to somehow come to term in how these two are, and you come to term with what you lose most of the times, and sometimes, and what can I say, like I believe that is the losing process, the getting a little bit to understand, try this impossible thing of forgetting a little bit what made who we are in order to understand something else. I mean, it's in the possibility of the impossible, probably. We constantly try and activate. Yeah.
These synergies. What pushed you to create homage to Kafka? And what was the relation to the protagonists that we see in the video?
So, homage to Kafka is so you still see my screen, eh? It's a film. So while I was doing all this layered project, I was also working within the setting of the code, and homage to Kafka was very much an urge to tell my existence there, because I was feeling very, very lonely there, and it never happened. I mean, I never had this experience before. It's very particular. I mean, it's to be inside the Prime Minister's office never happened in my life, to be in that kind of position. And okay, we have this expression of something being Kafkian, as paradoxical somehow, and I felt very much like that. But in everyday life, I was seeing, in everyday working life, I was seeing, the guards and the cleaning ladies and the stenographer of the building, who worked there since like 50 years, like taking care of it, and probably by taking care of it, to me it seemed they didn't, although it was a very repetitive act, that you can forget about, but is to me it seems that they were the real the people that didn't take that place for granted somehow, that because they had to take care of it every day, and they knew that if they didn't take care of it, it would collapse, somehow. And they were the only people who I found there who had this strength, in them. And so I asked them to collaborate a little bit and make this film, which voice is actually Diana's voice, who reads a parable contained in the Trial by Franz Kafka. Therefore, the title Homage to Kafka. And this parable tells the story of a man who comes from the country, who goes and asks access to the law, to the gatekeeper of the law, and he asks for access. And this is probably the very peculiarity of Kafka's parable, because the man from the country is by himself, is not with others, and it's very hard to enter the law by yourself. it's really that's the paradox of Kafka. And that was the paradox also of probably of me being there, and probably of everyone actually. So it's like I am just put some images of the film. I don't know how much they tell, but yeah, here you have the stenographer. The stenographer wrote in. She stenographed by handmade all the parable of Kafka, while Diana dictates to her the parable. No, and here you have the guards preparing the door, no, for people to enter. And the real life is only reflected on the mirror of the doors. And here you have the doors inside, with the symbol of the double-headed eagle, which is the symbol of Albania, and the Republika Shqipërisë, yes. Yeah.
So in your work, you have a continuous, I think, bringing marginal stories to a kind of center. And since this is also a link that we have to Diana's work and with the activists of Fatah, who are on the marginal of Tirana, which is the center of power and of cultural access, how would you relate this marginality and center in your work? And maybe we could link that to Martesa Ature, which is another very interesting project that you did with Diana and the activists of Ata.
Yeah. Well, this is like the peripheral and the center. It's very interesting because we worked, I mean, obviously in this dynamic, no, in the sense that I'm in the center right now, and Kamza is the periphery. But in an essay that Diana wrote also about the work we did together, she writes Valentina from the periphery of the center and us from the center in the periphery, you know, because the Ata is a center. I mean, when we say we go to Ata, you say, I come to the center. This is what we say. You know, when you say you go to the Prime Minister's office building, you don't say I go to the center, because it feels so distant, no, from something central to us, like no personally, no, not politically. Politically is obvious, it is, you know. But I believe that there are also elements of centrality and peripheral in everything we do, no? Mm-hmm. And is probably it's embedded in us, so we are marginal also in what we are doing. We are marginal because we cannot represent fully in a central way, you know, what we are doing and who we are. It's not possible. So probably what marginality produces is the necessity of of producing with others, of creating the commons that we are speaking about.
Yes, because also this reminds me a little bit of what Claudia was saying in the introduction of the project, which also inspires us a little bit, this dichotomy of marginality and periphery in terms of Eastern Europe and Western Europe. Because she was mentioning this idea of progress, and the presence of the bulldozer is very much so a reminder that we need to make our journey from the periphery to the center, and the center is Western Europe. So this idea of passing as, because we know we are not quite there. So we are looking obsessively at the center, which is Western Europe, rich Western Europe. And they are looking at us back as something quite new, quite interesting, changing, and also as a small reflection of their progress. So I think there is also this correlation of the center, which is the West, which looks us with this vanity, and the periphery, which longs, which is the Easternness, to go towards. And then in the middle, it's some laws, some corruption, and some bulldozers, and that's how these kind of patterns then sometimes communicate. But
yeah, it's a very
reflection. Yeah,
it's a very patriarchal, way of this possess and destroy. We have to possess, we have to destroy somehow. But there is a really interesting story of that Hannah Arendt and also other philosophers speak about the paradox of Ulysses, in the Odyssey. I mean, it seems that it doesn't have anything to deal with what we're talking about right now, but it actually does in many ways. So in the Odyssey, Ulysses is, to make it simple, he is hiding, and he hears an old blind man telling stories of heroes, and within these stories there is his story too. And so he hears his own story, and at the moment that he hears his own story, he cries. And within the whole of his adventures, etc., he never cries. While he's doing it, he never cries. But when he hears his story, he does. And so, I mean, this can be read in many different ways. But I thought about it when you told me about the West, because I don't think the West has ever been prepared of listening to its own story from another point of view. And maybe that's a big problem of it, in the sense that we are not telling the story of the West. We are trying to emulating it in many different ways, and now it's a bit complex discourse, but I see it a little bit in this perspective.
And how did you find this attempt of progress with Palati Culturas and your initiation of Martesa Atura? It looks like Palati Culturas attempts to be a modern, accessible, multicultural center, as Diana was referring to us before, but then we suddenly find the bank, as you said, all the layers, and suddenly we cannot access the library, even less so the theater. And how did you come about to work with them further on with Martesa Atura?
So I just go on with the images, sorry. Okay, Martesa Atura starts. So here you can see a picture of the Palati Culturas in Kamsa from outside. The blue is the color of the Democratic Party that built it, and also the symbol. Yeah. And on the left you can see the stools that are made by men who gather at the Palati Culturas to play domino, which is a common practice in Albania everywhere. and they take the actual bricks from the floor to play domino, and so the first let's say element that was very, very interesting is that since there's no use of palaticultures apart from what Diana just explained before, but the real use that people are doing is this, no? So they take the stools and they take the bricks and they use them to play domino because that's what they do. And so martesature is, which means their wedding. So it starts from the idea of the paradox of the promise. Now, what is a promise? A promise amongst ourselves, amongst us as friends, amongst activists and government, among us as society, etc., etc. So the negotiation of this promise had two levels. No, one was two elements. Sorry, one was me creating postcards of cames. Cames is often represented by these palaticultures. No, so they are very proud of it. I mean, they use it as. And they, I mean, the politicians, the local government, yes, and they use it as a symbol of, because it's the biggest and investment, I would say, because it's not just the one of the biggest city in Albania, but Palaticultures is one of the biggest palace of culture in the country also. And so, like, I made these postcards where the representation of Kamsa is not the Palaticultures, but is what people make use of the Palaticultures, which is these tools that these men use. And then the second element. So here, the second element was the capacity of let's say, the linguistic project of ATA, which is, okay, it uses theater, it uses collaborations with artists, but in probably, then Diana will tell me if I'm right, but the first thing that I notice is the poetical side of it, and how words and poetry are used to develop this imagination that we're talking about. And so so we reflected in the paradox of promise with these two elements. So we created a moment of encounter with this older man, let's say, and the idea was to make a martesa, a wedding, by first of all exchanging, instead of the rings, a postcard instead of a brick. So and the bricks actually is so paradoxical also, because, I mean, they belong to the floor, which means they should belong to everyone, But of course, they use them as tools, so they belong to them. And that is perfectly fine, I think. So, so we tried to exchange, to do this exchange. And of course, they didn't want to exchange. They were asking for other things, but no, we don't give the bricks. But finally we convinced them. So there was this part, and we brought the bricks back to the center, and in the center, this is the real center. And so we use the bricks to exchange our for text that some wrote about what it means, what a promise mean, and others like Verona in this case in the picture, who just made a free intervention, which wasn't prepared before. And then I don't know if I have other pictures. No, this is the installation, but this and then she and then we like in a wedding, we ate and we danced all day, basically. That was the idea, and it lasted all day. And then last year we brought the work to Motrat Space, which is a space in Pristina in Kosovo, and we were invited by Lola Sulay, who's another artist in Pristina, and we showed the work there and an intervention that we did in the space. That was, the entrance was surrounded by these 2 columns. So we used the columns to write, "I promise I will always be there for you," with the chalk. Yes, this is the last probably intervention with it, with this idea of reflecting on the meaning of the paradox of the promise.
So the promise is a form of creating commons and celebrating commons if there is no access to commons, because physically the youngsters of Ata cannot enter the Palace of Culture, but they can create these commons by promising to be. Diana agrees with this, but because Valentina, you always, and I find this very fascinating about your work, you mentioned the friendship, and we talked about commons also as a relationship of interacting, and also the 4 of us are here because we have a relationship with each other, and in every relationship we know there is a practice of care, or at least it should be. And this practice of care assures sustainability through time. It means also that you have to give up something in order for it to function. It also means that you keep your perspective, but you translate it so that also the perspective of the other person is seen. And this is also what Diana, with the activist group Ata, also attempts to continuously do, also with the theater. So if they are bulldozing, then we create friendships. Could this be a solution of commons?
I don't know what it can be a solution of commons, but in terms, like going back to friendship, I think friendship is a choice, no? Is a I mean, it has many elements, but is about not accepting passively what is given to us, but choose what kind of relationships and what kind of belief we want to share and with who. So for me, this is very much embedded in what I do as a person in life and as an artist, but also I believe that's what I've learned also in all these contexts I've been that you mentioned in the beginning, and ultimately I learned a lot from Kamsa and from Ata and Teatri Ature, which they developed with Anila Balla, who's a theater director. Is to choose I don't know, maybe create another weight system for this bulldoze, or something like that. And and believe, even if it is utopic or imaginary or starting from dreams, what it can be otherwise, but never ever stopping sharing this and work on it every day, because that's is not a piece of work, is not a film, is not an exhibition, is not a performance with the theater. Is every day we will have to work on it, because otherwise you don't choose it, you choose it half, and I don't think there is a half choice that one can make.
Yes, this is very interesting, the word choose, because we in Albania, as a post-communist country, and with the difficulty of building a social existence politically and amongst each other after the 90s, we have this scare of the word political, especially also how the question of the National Theatre and its demolition was then represented throughout the media or different media assets or different politicians. You kind of have the scare to problematize the bigger picture, which was also the idea of this talk, you know, to talk about commons as a practice of resistance, of friendship that goes beyond the physical space, but which has to do with the physical space. So I don't know if Diana agrees, but this political is a hard work for us to make it about choice, about saying that you should have a choice and about being open to a choice. And that is not only about sympathizing for a political party or for being part of a bipolar pseudo-political game, which is a little bit the struggle, I think, to identify with the social cause. I don't know if Diana has a comment on that, or you, Valentina, and Claudie. And who's watching, if they want, please, in the channels that they are seeing this streamed, technically the Biennale very kindly helps us see all the questions, and we will translate them and tell them and hopefully answer them. Diana or Valentina?
Yeah, I fully agree, in fact, with what Valentina said and you. It's very important because our way of existing and living in Kamsa or being activists, in fact, it is our everyday life. So we cannot imagine ourselves living there without our practices that we created as an informal group of activists of Kamsa. And the only way to live there, and maybe in every city, it is to every day create and share it with others, our knowledge, our experience, and to take care of each other, trying to build this community. So that was my comment, and that's why we had the connection with Vale, and we tried, and we are continuing our collaboration, but also with Claudie and you, Andy, and we do not feel alone. That's very important for us from Kamsa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there's a better way to actually almost end this because, I mean, since the beginning, that's what we were thinking because, you know, commons, especially relating to also the last question of Andy on this part, on this constructed fear of identifying or being openly a political subject, you know, especially in Albania, because I think it's so also that public discourse is so occupied by the government propaganda and also the other militant groups that even in that space it's so hard for us to, you know, to claim it and be politically proud without being identified with the local let's say political parties, but the most important thing, especially in this kind of meeting place we had, because I wouldn't really call it a project, I think it's really to think of commons beyond also on how it was, you know, as a park, as a green space, as a public space, and just that. But especially what you said, Diana, in the end, is and also Valentina, you know, this idea of being actually an institution itself, especially when other institutions fail you, and this, you know, systems of solidarity and learning from each other and counterparting. The lack and also sometimes also the violence that comes from institutions. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I just want to end it here and say thank you. lot. It was very nice to meet Valentina. I don't know her personally, so I guess we'll have actually the most, my favorite institution in Albania, that is the coffee. So we can have it in Tirana.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for making this work, because I really like the way you pull together also the narrative of the video and you know your work within the Biennial also, and opening up to this perspective that I think it's very needed here.
Yeah, thanks also to Diana.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us and having us in this great conversation, which for sure it will lead us to other conversations and other cooperations between us. It's just the beginning, I think.
Thanks. And also I want to thank, I think, Valerie, if I'm not wrong, which is the guy that we cannot see, but helped us a lot with a lot of signs to not embarrass ourselves from the technical problems. And also thanks to Tamar. And yeah, to everybody else who have been supportive and shared with us this space, much needed. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to thank also Claudie and Yuan Chun Liu, who actually agreed to include me in the project and was a starter also for this conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.